Welcome to Season 4 of Guest of the Year. I'm the host. My name is Mike. This week's setlist curator is Dr. B. Steve Csaki. Steve is an assistant professor in English, Humanities, and Languages at Southeastern Oklahoma State University. He's co-editor of The Philosophy of the Western and a member of the Grateful Dead Studies Association. For Volume 6 of their annual compilation of scholarly papers, Steve contributed Caught on a Limb, Authorial Intention, He's Gone, and the Music of the Grateful Dead. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you. I'm really glad to be here. I appreciate your inviting me and then expect to have a lot of fun.
Thanks for being here. Here's how the game works. We'll play the first part of a Grateful Dead live track, and each contestant will use the messaging system to silently guess which year their performance is from. Contestants, who are all on a video conference together, can message in their guesses at any time during the clip or in the 10 seconds after it concludes. A rule change, our 3 contestants will hear 5 tracks, and whoever is the least number of years off in aggregate wins and continues on to next week. We've got our returning champ Adam here with us, and we'll meet the rest of the Deadheads in a moment, but first, without further ado, the Grateful Dead. All right, the guesses are in. He's Gone at Tivoli Concert Hall in Copenhagen, Denmark on April 17th, 1972. Steve, great pick. Tell us about that one.
So the reason that I chose this is because this is the first time that He's Gone was ever performed live. And it's sort of the basis of this paper that I wrote, which seeks to understand what this particular song means. And you guys probably all know the story behind this song, the original story, right, with Lenny Hart, who was the manager, right, for the Dead for a year from 69 to 70 and embezzled a large sum of money. There are various accounts of how much money exactly he took, anywhere from $70,000 to $200,000. And you translate that into today's dollars, it's a lot of money. And Robert Hunter was never a big fan of Lenny, and says that he warned the band about him, like not to trust this guy. And then that happened, and so Hunter wrote this song, ostensibly about this Lenny Hart fiasco, thievery, right? But of course, because Robert Hunter is who he is, didn't make it just about Lenny, right? It's open to various interpretations, and that's sort of what my paper is about, talking about how are we supposed to know what this song means, and what's the right interpretation, and what does it even mean to talk about a right interpretation? So, I mean, we obviously start with the first time the song was played, and it was about Lenny, right? That much we know at that point.
When did it first occur to you to write this paper where you talk about authorial intention and whether the crowd has a say in what a song means versus the lyricist, in this case, Robert Hunter?
Yeah, so that's a great question. This whole idea was a long time in developing. I had wanted to write about the Grateful Dead for years, but I didn't think I could write anything that would do them justice, right? So I really sort of sat on it for a long time. And then at some point, and I'm not exactly even sure when, I heard the origin story of this song. And then it got me thinking, because I had always thought of the song as an elegy, right? A song that they played after somebody had died, right? He's gone. And so I started thinking about that more and more. There's a traditional sort of belief in academia, right, particularly in the English literature tradition, that if you want to know the meaning of a work of art, you've got to talk to the artist, and you've got to ask the artist, and the artist's got to tell you, and then right? And that's it. And if you're guessing about other things, you must be wrong. Well, in the 50s, a couple of scholars, Beardsley and Wimsatt, came out and said, look, that doesn't really make sense, right? You ought to be able to interpret art without the artist, because, whatever it is there typically, and you can look at it and you can think whatever you want to think about it, and that should have significance. It should count. And that's called the intentional fallacy, the idea that it's only intention that matters. So I got really interested in this because I kind of believe that too. I mean, it's great to know what an artist means, but it seems like if the artist is dead and never explained to anyone what this particular work of art is supposed to mean, then what are we supposed to do? We can't ever know the meaning? And that doesn't seem right to me. And certainly not if you've experienced a Grateful Dead concert, right? Everyone has their own interpretation of what something means, what these songs mean, and what the whole experience means. Now, that doesn't mean that everybody's right, but it means that everybody's not wrong, I guess, is a way to put it.
But in the paper, you say that it is possible to be wrong in terms of an interpretation of lyrics. People can have different opinions, but it's possible to be flat wrong.
Yes.
Like if you think the song Hurricane by Bob Dylan's about World War II, that is not correct.
Yeah, that's called an obvious error, right? We have to have some information to determine that you're just flat out wrong. And so if someone is saying He's Gone is about Elvis Presley, the dates don't work. And in what Robert Hunter said about He's Gone and Pigpen, right? Because many people thought that He's Gone was an elegy written for Pigpen after he died. But as Hunter himself points out, this is 72 and Pigpen dies in 73. So it's simply not possible for the song to have been written about Pigpen. So that interpretation as the truth can't be the right interpretation. Now, what's interesting, though, is that all of these songs change over time. And that's actually, to me, one of the most fascinating things about the Grateful Dead. You've got songs played over a period of 25, 30 years that change, and the lyrics don't usually change, right? That Hunter really frowned upon that. So the lyrics don't really change, but the presentation, the feeling, the mood, all of that changes. Location, all of those things affect, how the crowd may interpret the song on a given day. So there is change, but it can't be too radical, right? It can't be just out in left field somewhere.
Thank you, Steve. Adam is our returning champ. He's 41 from Brooklyn. He got 1972. Adam, was there any doubt?
So I knew it was an early version because there's a little Jerry riff that evolves over time, and this was clearly of that earlier time. So I guess 72 because of the sound quality sounding like Europe 72. I wasn't sure if there was a 70. I didn't realize 72 was the first time it was played. So I was could this be 71 or 70 or something like that? But knew it was before that signature Jerry intro riff. And then the sound sounded like Europe 16 track.
So Barry is 58 from San Diego. He guessed 1972. Nice pull, Barry. Grayson guessed 1971. Barry, did you have any doubt that it was 1972?
I did have a little bit of doubt. It sounded like vintage 72. It sounded like Europe 72, but it was faster. It had a little bit of a fast pace to it, which indicated to me this was an early version. And so Steve picked the very first version. And like Adam, I thought to myself, is this 71? Did they debut it in 71 and then it slowed down in 72? So that was my thought. But it sounded like 72, so I just said, got to go with 72. It had that distinctive Europe 72 sound.
Grayson is 53 from Dover, Massachusetts. You guessed 1971.
So when I first heard the track, initially I was without a doubt 1972. It had sounded obviously a very early version. And right off the top, I'm like, this sounds like Europe 72. But then I was actually trying to hear Keith's piano, and I didn't quite hear it. And I'm like, so maybe this is a early version from like, I know Keith came on in like October of 71. I'm like, maybe this is like an early version. So at the last second, I changed it to 71, but I'm like, this sounds like Europe 72, but there was just something about it. I just couldn't hear Keith. And I'm like, maybe it's 71. And I didn't realize that early 72 was the first performance of it. So that's where that kind of got hung up.
Adam has 0. Barry has 0. Grayson has 1. Let's hear Steve's second selection. He's Gone at Nassau Coliseum in Uniondale, New York on March 19th, 1973. Steve, where does this He's Gone fall in our tale of different He's Gone interpretations?
Yeah, so this is what I was referring to before. There was the first He's Gone, which we think, ought to be about Lenny. But this particular version was the first time that He's Gone was played after Pigpen's death. And so this is when it presumably was played as an elegy in memory of Pigpen. We don't know that for sure, but presumably a lot of the crowd that was there took that meaning from the song, right? And it had only been playing for a year before, so that's perfectly reasonable. If you'd never heard that song, you knew that Pigpen died, and then they play He's Gone at the concert, at the show, right? I mean, it would make sense. And so a lot of people interpreted the meaning of He's Gone as an elegy at that point in time. With music in particular, right, it's a performance art, so there needs to be an audience. And even Gadamer says, even if there isn't an audience, you imagine that there is one, because music is always played for someone. So in this case, of course, there is an audience, and the audience is bringing to the show what they're thinking about. The band is thinking probably about Pigpen, right? So is the audience. So now all of a sudden this merges, and the meaning of the song now has been altered and changed, and it's actually been sort of recreated. Gadamer talks about players, and everyone is a player, right? I mean, the band is playing the music, but the audience are players too, and in terms of determining meaning and creating meaning. We've already talked about blatant error, right? You can't just create any kind of meaning, but this is what's so interesting. When huge numbers of people congregate or small numbers of people congregate, all of this can be shared and create a new and different kind of meaning. So it's a very, very cool thing. And I do think that this is probably when He's Gone really shifted its meaning for both the band and, Deadheads.
Are there defining traits of an audience, like an active audience versus a passive audience?
That's a really good question. I think it depends in part on the art we're talking about, right? So, I mean, if we're talking about a sculpture, then the audience are viewers. But when we're talking about music, and of course, then it depends on the kind of music, right? Chamber music is sort of intentionally supposed to be an interpretation of the music, and the audience is less involved if it's there at all. But when it comes to the Grateful Dead, I think the audience is very interactive, right? I think the definition of what an audience is changes with respect to what the art is. If it's poetry and it's not being read, it's not a recital, and you're reading the poetry, it's you in a book. You are the audience, and the poem is the art. So I think it really sort of it depends on the specific art that you're talking about.
If you write poetry, say, and never share with anyone, does that get a different label, or can an artist be their own audience?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you imagine a musician practicing on their own, right? There's obviously another intended audience probably at some time that, at some time, other time and place that you're practicing for. But when you're the only one there, then you become the audience. So yeah, I think so. I think you can just be a singular, you can be your own audience, right? And I think we do that, right? And that's another one of these things of sort of subjectivity, objectivity, sort of blurring and coalescing and coming apart, which is, I think, what happens at Dead shows too.
Is it possible for a lyricist to be wrong about their own lyrics if their frame of mind changes?
That's another great question, right? I think that is possible. Hunter said that what he writes and what it becomes is never exactly what he intended. And so that's a suggestion that, I don't really know exactly what this is going to be. I start off with an intention and it becomes something else. And if you've ever done anything, creative, and by creative, that's a very a large sort of spectrum for me. Like if you build a doghouse, right? I mean, that can be creative, and you can have this idea of what it's going to be when you start making it. And then almost invariably, what you end up with is not exactly the same as the idea that you had in your head. Does that mean you're wrong? Well, I mean, it depends how off it is, right? But of course, I think also, Barlow seemed to indicate that songs were created and recreated all the time, and so that the meaning naturally shifted. I mean, him saying that suggests that, yeah, that meaning can change. Now, whether or not the lyricist is wrong about those meanings, that might be going a little too far. But if you're clinging to some particular meaning, you could end up being wrong for sure.
Barring some kind of like skiing accident, head injury, and you're like, it's about UFOs. Like, well,
yeah,
you're a different person now.
Yeah,
so.
no, yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So all these guys got it. 1973. Good job, everyone. Barry, why 1973?
Phil, you could hear Phil loud and out front. So different from the 72 version. You also had Donna there, pretty prominent. To me, it was very reminiscent of the RFK show. The He's Gone from RFK in June of that year. It is distinctly 73. It is not 72 in any way. The bass, Donna, those were the two real harbingers for me.
Is that RFK 73 show, could it be considered the best show ever?
Not for me personally, but I could see a bona fide argument to be made that is as good as anything. And, eras are apples and oranges, I think. I know where I want the time machine to take me, if I could have the time machine.
Yeah.
So I think the summer of 85, from Blossom through Merriweather, I was at SPAC, and I was very much a neophyte at the time, but the Merriweather show, that amazing shakedown, Hershey, I think it's so underappreciated and knocked because Jerry is inconsistent, but the song choices that year were phenomenal. And Phil is lead bass on much of it, and much of it's owed to a lot of leaked boards. There's some really pristine boards from 85 that sound better than almost every year. I would not argue that it's objectively the best period. I'm not saying that. I'm saying
Sure.
I think that would be fun because it was the scene was under the radar. People who were there really wanted to be there, whereas you get to 89 and there was a whole lot of invasion of people that maybe a third were just like, what is this? Where 85, everyone was locked in. It was, the Fat Man Rocks bumper. Everyone was into it. It was really a fun time.
Right on, Barry. Nice pull. Adam, you also guessed 1973.
Yeah, so similar, but with the vocal starting it, that's like always a little hard. But heard Phil in the vocal harmony mix, and I think that Phil pretty much stopped singing after 73. So I was like, all right, sounds like 73. And then other than that, it sounded clear, but it was the Phil in the vocal harmony that gave me that one.
And Grayson, 73.
Yeah, very similar to what Barry and Adam were saying. Obviously, it sounds completely different from 72. For a tenth of a second, you're like, maybe 74, but, it's funny, a couple weeks ago, we were at a buddy's house doing a little Bob Weir tribute, and my buddy loves the 52673 Kezar show, and we listened to the He's Gone into Truckin', and it was just, ripping. And, those He's Gones from 73, they're not all the same, but there's a sound to them. And you could tell just in what we were listening to, they were noodling their way right into Truckin'. And so to me, it was a no-brainer that was 1973.
Grayson, how did you get into the Dead?
Well, it actually goes back probably 1987, 88 at my summer camp. Everybody, all the counselors were huge Deadheads back then. And you just were kind of, I don't want to say forced to listen to it, but it was just always on. You'd walk by any bunk and you would just hear bootlegs, just playing. And, a couple of the older counselors, hey, listen to this. And next thing you know, everyone's dubbing tapes. And every summer that we'd come back, it'd be like, oh, who got some new tapes? So I probably had about 2 years of just, listening to bootlegs, and then caught my first show, Hartford, 1990, I guess 36 years ago yesterday, was my first show. And from that point on, my life has been great.
People gathering together and listening to music just isn't kind of something that happens anymore. Could you explain what that looks like? Is it everyone sitting around a boombox like a campfire, or is it more people chatting and sort of listening like a house party?
I'll tell you, some nights, when we were staff members, we had like the big rec hall right off of the beach, and we would be down there with a little fire going, with a little boombox, and from 10 o'clock at night to 3 o'clock in the morning, we were just spinning tapes and doing our thing, and it was fantastic. And somebody would be playing a little acoustic guitar like in between Dead tracks, but it was every night. And the great thing about that particular camp is, to this day, people still listen to the Dead there. Like the older staff members, who are in their 50s, 60s, they got their Dead shirts. Yeah, obviously the younger guys listen to whatever stuff is the kids listen to these days, but there's still that core of the older administration that walk in there and they're still playing the Dead. So some things never change.
So it was active listening.
Oh, very much. Yeah.
Talking over the
And
music.
to this day, we're all still great friends. So like we'll go to each other's houses and just literally spend 4 hours just, picking different tunes and for different reasons, and just listen to it, break it down, enjoy it. And, it kind of takes us back to when we were 16 years old.
Beautiful. Thank you, Grayson. Adam has 0, Grayson has 1, Barry has 0. Let's hear Steve's third of 5 tracks.
This one's for Bubba Sands.
He's Gone at Nassau Coliseum in Uniondale, New York. On May 6th, 1981, the taper was Barry Glassberg. Steve, tell us about that He's Gone.
So yeah, this is a continuation of the story, right? And trying to figure out, how this song is being played and what it's supposed to mean. And finally, here we actually have something that fairly rarely happens, right? Is that the song is dedicated to someone. And in this case, it's dedicated to Bobby Sands, who was an IRA soldier, right? Who was captured by the British and was in prison and went on a hunger strike and actually died as a result of the hunger strike. And the band members had apparently been following this story and, were quite moved by this act. The fact that Bobby dedicates this song to Bobby Sands suggests that, in fact, it is being played as an elegy for Bobby Sands. So it's sort of proof that, hey, at least in 1981, we know that this one particular time, He's Gone was played as an elegy to, as a remembrance for someone. And it does seem to me that if you listen to the whole song, that it seems to have a sort of emotional component to it. And the crowd is also, I think, feeling that. So that's why this song is really, really important in terms of what I'm trying to say, that He's Gone has changed meanings and that it can have a different meaning every time it's played with respect to if it's played for someone, right? I mean, what's interesting about it, about this particular song is that you guys may know this, but it was played, I think, 48 times in 72 and then like 25 times in 73. And then after that, it was just not played very often. So that kind of makes sense when you think of that, particularly since in 81, it is actually dedicated to a person who died, who was meaningful to band members. So that would explain if the song has actually shifted meaning from being about Lenny to being an elegy. Well, you're not going to play a song that remembers someone, all the time. That would be kind of weird. So this is sort of evidence that the song, in fact, did change in meaning, and was seen by the band and the audience, right, together as having this meaning of an elegy.
And Hunter, while having a meaning in mind when he wrote the lyrics, left room for interpretation on purpose by not being overly specific.
Yeah, I totally think so. I mean, rat in a drain ditch caught on a limb, right? That could be Lenny Hart, right? But cat on a tin roof, dogs in a pile, nothing left to do but smile, smile, smile. I don't see how that exactly talks about Lenny. He wanted everyone to listen to his songs and bring their own experience to that song and then understand it in their own way. He didn't want people to be totally wrong about it, and he certainly didn't want people to say that his song lyrics had no meaning, right? So I think that was his intention, to allow for a varied interpretation, but keeping it within a certain sort of reasonableness, right? But of course, that reasonableness is pretty expansive, I think.
And the one time again, I'm quoting your paper, I'm not just spouting off my incredible knowledge here. The one time he felt the need to speak up about a wrong interpretation in his mind was about Franklin's Tower.
Yeah, and I'll be totally honest with you, I didn't know this either, but this guy named Jürgen Fauth wrote this sort of critical commentary on Hunter's work and cited Franklin's Tower as, basically, I don't remember the exact quotation, but basically as just being sort of meaningless, a bunch of words put together, right? And I guess Hunter got pissed off because he wrote a very specific, detailed response and sort of poked fun at the notion of semiotics in it. But basically, he went through Franklin's Tower and explained all of what he was talking about. And it was, I had trouble following it. Like it was really amazing, the allusions that he was making, in that song. And then he was like, look, don't tell me that my songs have no meaning. Here, I'll explain this one for you since you can't get it, which is something he never really did. But I think Jürgen got under his skin, right? And he responded.
So Grayson and Barry sent in their 1981 guesses about 15 seconds into the song, and Adam was not far behind them. Barry, was it the Bobby Sands shout out? And did you know the exact show?
Yeah, I knew it was 5/6/81. I knew this because it's such a rare shout out thing. And by knowing that, I almost couldn't, I divorced myself. I couldn't really analyze it because I knew it. I knew what it was. And then after a second, I said, okay, this is clearly that. And I don't think they did this more than once. And it sounds like 81 right away, too. And I kind of had a feeling we were getting to the elegy portion of He's Gone. So both of those things.
Something similar, Grayson?
Yeah, same thing. I mean, I know that was also like a Dick's Picks release. So, and I kind of have one of those deadhead problems where I listen to every Dead show of the day. So, like, I've listened to 5/6/81, the last 30 years, on 5/6/81. And, that, Bobby Sands reference, and was it 6/21/86? They do it for Len Bias, the Celtic player who, he got drafted and died of a heart attack, from cocaine. Like literally the day after he got drafted. And obviously with Bill Walton being a huge deadhead and playing for the Celtics, they obviously did it for Bill and did it for the Celtics. So, it was rare that they would mention this is for so-and-so. And again, just having it been the official recording. I think they may have done it also for Marley like a week later. I know they made a couple references to Bob Marley in May, I think on the 12th and something maybe on the 15th or an estimated. Bobby did a little like get up, stand up, but with the He's Gone, I think from 5/12. So, yeah.
Steve, are there other Dead tunes you could have written this paper about? Or if not Dead tunes, other tunes by other artists?
Yeah, I think probably I could have written this paper about some other Dead tunes, but to have this clear shift, I am not aware of any other songs by the Dead or really anyone else that have that, right? That have an origin story that then completely changes, right? I mean, it's not just the fact that the origin story is sort of different than an elegy. I mean, the origin story is an angry, pissed off, this guy, was family, literally, right? And then stole from us, and he pretended to be a preacher. Nowadays, of course, it doesn't seem like he was such a terrible human being because, well, look around, right? But back then, it seemed like who could possibly do this to their son, right? And, their son's band. So it's a shift that is profound, right? It's not just a slight difference, which I'm sure you could find in lots of different songs from different bands. I mean, I just can't think off the top of my head of any song that changed meanings like that, though I'm sure there are some, right? I just don't know. I just don't know them.
Yeah, I mean, it was perfect for what you were exploring. Adam, you also got 81. Did the Bobby Sands shout out clue you in as well?
I got the Bobby Sands, but I was like, I need to come up with something intelligent to say about the choice. So I was, like early 80s, you got the clean Jerry tone. It's Tiger, but it sounds a little cleaner. And his voice was like still kind of sweet. So that was for what I gathered from listening before submitting.
This is a very close game. Adam has 0, Grayson has 1, Barry has 0. Before we go on to the fourth of 5 songs, Barry, how did you get into the Dead?
I got into the Dead as a young one, like many, with an older brother, and there were albums. It was the early to mid 70s. There was, Beatles, Cat Stevens, and Europe 72, and I took a quick shine to Europe 72 as a 8-year-old. I have a memory of being in maybe 4th grade and then the teacher asking, "What are your favorite songs?" and writing down He's Gone, Tennessee Gin, and Sugar Magnolia. And Europe 72 was the cement in my head that period. And then just listened to that in albums and was not aware of live bootleg tapes until college. So I kind of listened to Skeletons from the Closet and other albums, and I didn't realize there was a world out there. And one good friend from college, freshman year, had boxes of bootlegs, and whoa! And then this world opened up, and that was the fall of '84, and from that point on, it's been so it's sort of like two births. One as a youngster, liking it amongst Cat Stevens, Jethro Tull, as I became a teen, all the other stuff, metal, all the stuff, and then in college, knowing that there was this, and then couldn't listen fast enough to tapes, and like Grayson was saying, knowing, boy, there's a soundboard. There's a soundboard that exists of a tour that sort of happened, and it was a different mindset being, while it was an ongoing venture, looking to go to shows, looking to gather tapes of what was happening and what was ongoing. Whereas the younger people now, it's all out there and it's finite. And so they can learn X, Y, and Z because it's all set in stone. Whereas it was a different process. And I think in many ways feel blessed that was part of that process, and to not know what was happening, and it was all new.
But did you know like the timeline? Could you draw a timeline of Pigpen was with the band from 65 to 72, Brent joined in 79. Did you have a grasp on that entire timeline?
Sort of, but my interest in it wasn't that great because I wasn't going to see that, right? I was going to 4 shows in the fall, and I wanted to know what did they do in the summer that I didn't see. So no, but I fully knew, and I loved the friend who turned me on for it. We would listen to tons of Pig tapes. Loved Pig. One of the actually, never knew I was going to live in San Diego, but there's a San Diego Civic show from '70. One of my favorite shows we would listen to all the time. And it was just Pig in it at his best. And so we would delve into that, but there was a different mindset. I think since '95, it was sort of, okay, this finite exploration of everything that's out there and discovering things that I never really delved into, and I was aware of, but not at the level or depth that subsequently have been into.
Sure. Thank you, Barry. So we have another track coming up, the 4th. Again, Adam 0, Grayson 1, Barry 0. Let's hear the 4th selection from Steve.
9 miles skidding on a 10-mile ride. Hot as a pistol, but cool inside. Cats on the tin roof, dogs in a pile. Nothing left to do but smile, smile, smile. Now he's gone. Now he's gone. No, he's gone. He's gone. Steam locomotive rolling down the track. He's gone. No, that love is gonna bring him back.
He's Gone at the Spectrum in Philly on September 11th, 1990. Steve, how does that He's Gone fit into this story?
Yeah, so this is the first time that He's Gone was played after Brent died. So obviously we would assume it was an elegy for Brent. I was in Japan when Brent died, and my friend Nick called me and told me, and I was just devastated because I was like, well, that's it. It's over. It's like, little did I know, but it was really, I mean, I cried. It was bad, but yeah, that's the first time they played it after he died. And so it fits in there as being, I think, an elegy for Brent. Because, at this point they weren't playing it as often as they used to, again, because as we said before, or as I said before, it seems to have shifted clearly into a song of remembrance for someone after their passing.
Yeah, completing the transformation from a polemic into an elegy.
Yeah, I think the audience absolutely had to have known what was going on there.
Thank you, Steve. Grayson and Adam both got it in 1990. Barry guessed 1989, which means Adam goes into the final song with a 1-year lead over Grayson and Barry. Incredibly dramatic. This is why people tune in to guess the year, everyone. Grayson, why 1990?
I heard Vince, and not Brent. So that was, giveaway there. I didn't hear Hornsby with any backups because Bruce didn't join the band for a couple. He joined on the 15th and this was on the 11th. So it was a couple nights before that. At first, I'm like, oh, it's either 91 or 90. But then I'm like, I don't hear, Hornsby's piano and I don't hear his vocals. So I'm like, it's got to be, basically that run of September, either, 7, 8, whatever. But obviously they didn't play He's Gone to the 11th. So just kind of by process of elimination, I figured it was 1990.
Beautiful breakdown.
By the way, that September run of, what was it, Richfield and Philly and then Madison Square Garden, very strong shows. I mean, kind of given everything that was going on, I think much tighter than actually the Europe shows, in October. And I was never a fan of Vince. Like, again, obviously with all due respect, his vocals were a little too shrieky, for me. And his keyboard playing just sounded like very, and again, I'm not a musician, but it just sounded very like basic. And what I also started to notice with him, like you listen to like a Shakedown Street and his little jams, whatever, sound exactly the same every time he plays it, right? Or like Feel Like a Stranger, which is, similar, type of beat, to Shakedown. I'm like, oh, he kind of plays the same riff in Shakedown Street as he's doing in Feel Like a Stranger. So to me, like there was nothing spontaneous and nothing interesting about his playing. But like when you would listen to Brent, during it, he just like a little twinkle, like just out of nowhere. It's like, that's what makes Brent, and why he was different, than Hornsby and, and much different than Vince. Long-winded answer.
Great response. Thanks, Grayson. Adam also guessed 1990. You put yourself in a good position here. What'd you hear?
I struggled with that, and I actually was like super on the fence of doing 89 because unlike Grayson, I kind of knew it was like not Brent, but it didn't quite sound like Vince either. Like Vince sounded more raspy than he usually did. And I also heard this like jack piano. And so that's where I was like, man, that was hard. And I was like, I know it's like 89 or 90. And then I was like, I wonder if this is the Brent elegy. And so I went with 90 based on the narrative arc of versus my what I picked up.
Playing the game. Nice work. Barry, you did hear 89. Talk us through it.
I share a lot of what Adam said is that before the track was, as soon as I heard it, I said, this has got to be the first He's Gone after Brent died. But I go, we can't be that spot on the nose. We can't just be that obvious. So I talked myself out of it. I said, let me listen. And I did not hear any Hornsby, who's not there. And unlike Grayson, I didn't know the dates in September when Hornsby joined. I thought Hornsby came I know there was a handful of shows, Richfield and like the first garden or two, that he wasn't there. So I was thinking he was there for the first time they broke it out. So I convinced myself, well, there's no Hornsby. And like Adam, it didn't quite sound like Vince's shrill. He would usually be very high. It didn't have that. And it didn't have Brent's, He's Gone when he would hit the organ pretty heavy. Didn't have that, but it could have sounded like Brent's keyboards from the early 80s, which he kept. And there was occasions in the late 80s he would dabble in those. And so because of the logic of not thinking it was going to be on the nose, I convinced myself, well, maybe it's late 80s and Brent is just not as prominent and he's playing some of the older. And it was somewhat confusing to me for that, but I think I unlogicked myself, if that's an expression. Tough one.
Before we go on to the possibly final song, Steve, how did you get into the Dead?
Well, the story of how I didn't get into the dead is actually to me sometimes more interesting than the actual story. But it was like 84 or 85. I'm not exactly sure when. And I was driving around in my car by myself. I had like $16 in my pocket, and ad came on the radio that the Dead were playing at Starlight Theater. I'm from Kansas City, so and I was like 16 or 15 or no, I had to be 16 at least to be driving around. And I thought about going to the show, and I was like, At that point, I knew, trucking, Casey Jones, and whatever. And I was like, nah, I don't think I'm going to go, and so I didn't. And then I went to college, and I met this guy, this friend of mine who's still a very good friend of mine, Nick, and his older brother had gotten him into the Dead, and he was a serious Deadhead, and he was from the Midwest like me, and we had gone to school on the East Coast, which is kind of a trip for people from the Midwest to go to the East Coast, because you walk around campus and you say, "Hey, how you doing?" Because that's what we do in the Midwest. And everybody's like, "What the hell's wrong with you? Stop talking to me. I don't know you." So we became really good friends, and he would play bootlegs in the car as we went from place to place. And I kind of was like, wow, there's a whole lot more here than, I had no idea. And so I kind of got more interested, and then at a certain point, somehow, and I don't even remember exactly how this happened, but I got 2 tickets to a show in '87 at the Philly Spectrum, and I told Nick, I was like, I got these tickets. You want to go? And he's like, I can't. He had something else going on. He's like, I'd really like to go, but I can't. And so this other friend of mine who'd never seen the Dead before either, and didn't know anything about him. He grew up in Spain. We drove down from upstate New York to Philly, and my world changed. Right, I had never seen anything like just the parking lot. Just like I was like, wow. And so we go into the show, and Blues Traveler opened. Which was interesting too. Fat man on the harmonica, right? Big man on the harmonica. But that was pretty cool. And then the show just blew me away, and that was it. I was pretty much on the bus at that point.
And to put a bow on your wonderful piece, you spend a lot of it going over these 2 different interpretations, and at the end you offer a third. And I'm wondering if you could explain that third, also very reasonable interpretation of "He's Gone."
Yeah, so that one, comes from the whole "steal your face" sort of expansion of what that means. What it meant in the beginning, probably for Hunter, was, shit, this guy will just steal your face. He'll just take. He's such a thief scumbag that he'll literally take your face right off, right, and he'll steal it. That's what the kind of person he is. But then, the Steal Your Face image came out, and the album came out, and so that then became a sort of different meaning for Steal Your Face. And then yet another sort of meaning came on, people were taking LSD. Yeah, there you go. And, this feeling that the self is gone, right? In a weird kind of way, your own self kind of is sort of gone. And people started referring to that "steal your face" as, as the experience of when you're tripping really hard, right? That you just feel like your face has been stolen right off your head, right? So that is another potential meaning of at least that particular portion, right? That line from "He's Gone." I mean, the sort of history of psychedelic drug use, started off as a sort of experimental thing to see what could happen with Timothy Leary and all that sort of stuff. And, and then it was a controlled substance, and really bad, and, can't do this, and only crazy people would ever take those drugs. And then and now it has evolved to the point where it is once again being scientifically studied, not so much LSD, but psilocybin from mushrooms, is being used to treat folks who have severe depression or other mental problems, and it seems to be highly effective, especially people who sort of have terminal illnesses and they become very anxious, right? They have used psilocybin to treat these folks, and they basically give them a day-long trip in a very controlled setting, and of course music is part of it, I don't know what music. It ought to be the Grateful Dead, but I don't know what music they're playing for these folks. But the studies indicate that a lot of people really change afterwards, and their anxiety is gone, and they sort of accept what's coming. And I sort of think, I mean, I have no idea that I'm right about this, but I think it's because when you take heavy hallucinogens, right, one of the things that happens is the way that you perceive reality completely changes. And it's very hard to differentiate things, right? Things that would be simple under normal circumstances become very different. And so your perception changes completely. And perception and the self are intricately connected, right? We don't know exactly what the self is. Philosophers have been trying to figure that out ever since there have been philosophers. So Plato thinks that the self is sort of a soul that exists after you die, that will go to some place, what he calls the realm of the forms, and gain knowledge, and then will sort of possibly be reincarnated into another person later. And of course, the Hindus have notions of reincarnation. Certain schools of Buddhism have notions of reincarnation. So the notion that somehow the self or some part of the self doesn't go away when you die is sort of all over the world. But so is the notion that the self is just gone, right? You die and it's over. And of course, that's what causes folks anxiety. Well, if you take a drug that makes it seem like you're not anybody anymore and you can't hardly remember who you are or what you are or how you think, and everything changes completely, it can help you understand theoretically, right? I mean, potentially, it can help you understand that you're part of something that is much, much bigger, and that you are sort of an insignificant part of it. So clinging to yourself, and fearing death becomes something that doesn't make a lot of sense anymore. Bobby talked about death a lot and didn't, said he didn't fear it. He was going to move on to another plane and or another kind of existence. And that's, I wish I wish that I could embrace that, right? Like I don't want to die. I'm not afraid of death, but I like existing, right? I like being here. And that, I think, is because I'm, from a Buddhist perspective, I'm much too attached to myself. And the Buddhists say that ultimately the self is something that the mind makes, right? It doesn't really exist. Your mind creates it. And so if you can let that go and still exist, well, that's what enlightenment is. I think it's interesting that we've made this sort of full circle back to looking at certain drugs as being possibly therapeutic. And if this sort of steal your face thing makes sense, and it seems to make sense, right? I mean, you've got scientific backing now to a certain degree, then that's a possible third way to understand the song. And I mean, it seems like, well, you're grabbing just one little line out of a verse and making all this up. But there's a little bit more to it than that, because, of course, he's gone. Makes you think about, well, how do we make sense of that? How do we make sense of someone being gone and it being painful, and there, and us sort of making an elegy when people pass, and grieving, the whole process of grieving? Like, what are you grieving, right? The person's not there anymore. They're gone. Well, there's this weird sort of epistemological thing where you say, well, how can I be suffering? How can I have a problem knowing that something isn't there, right? Or someone isn't there? And yet, of course, we suffer terribly when we lose people that we love. And so there's something going on there that's a little bit more complicated. It's this absence that we can feel, and yet there's nothing there. So that is also in some way analogous to what the self is. And so I think that you can read the whole song in that way, in that you're lamenting loss. And I'm quite certain, that there are other meanings that I simply haven't thought about. I haven't talked to enough deadheads about what they think it means, right? But I'll bet that there's a lot of other, maybe not a lot, but I bet that there are other interpretations that are reasonable as well.
Beautifully said, Steve. Thank you. And of course, the first episode since Bobby moved on, and it is comforting as he told our Angie Martosio that he does not fear death, and even if we're all kind of left with a void, he wasn't suffering or in a fearful state as he transitioned. So thank you, Steve.
Well done, Steve. That third theory, it's impressive. That's profound.
Thank you.
Really well done.
And while I know the idea of the mushroom trip for terminal patients has all those benefits, that would be a very difficult time to get turned on to the dead with only weeks to live. Like, oh, shit. Like,
terrible timing.
Yeah. And there are 2,000 of these shows. Fuck. All right. Here's the fifth track. Adam has a 1-year lead. He's gone. I'm just kidding. It was Mississippi Half Step, Uptown Toodaloo at the Spectrum in Philly on March 29th, 1987. The tapers were Stephen B. Porter and Peter Braverman. Steve.
Yeah, so this is completely personal. And I was like, oh shit, I just gave this away, right? Because this was the first show that I ever saw. And my friend Nick had told me sort of like what to expect and what to do, right? He was telling me who was in the band and where Jerry would be. Would Jerry be on the right-hand side? You know, he never moves. He just plays the guitar. He's very still, very quiet. You know, and I'm watching this show and Jerry's like doing fucking Pete Townsend shit, you know? Like, and I'm like, wait a minute. Nick said he didn't do that stuff. So I was really confused about that. And then he told me, you know, you need to write down the set list, right? I need to know what they played. And you need to know also. So to write down the set list. So I'm trying to write, you know, all this stuff, but hell, I don't even know most of these songs. And so I'm sort of making up titles for the song so that, you know, I can at least explain to Nick what I heard and then he can say, yeah, that was The Wheel, you know. So we get to Mississippi Half Step and I'm like, man, this is a rockin' tune, you know, and I've got it. It's Mississippi Half Step, right? I write that down. And then all of a sudden, you know, they shift into the second part of the song. And I'm like, oh, well, this is a different song? This has got to be a different song, right? So I write Rio Grande. And of course, you know, I come to find that, no, that's all one song. So that's always just stuck with me as a really incredible experience of like, this is a unique band. There are not other bands like this, right? I mean, so it was very, very special, you know, and one of the reasons that I got into the Dead was that show.
Brilliant, Steve. So Adam guessed 85, Grayson guessed 90, Barry guessed 89. Adam wins because he was 2 years off over 5 songs. Grayson was 4 years off and Barry was 3 years off. Congratulations, Adam. 3-peat. The floor is yours. Congratulations.
That was tough because 80s odds are really hard. So, you know, you could hear, I was going by Jerry's voice. Jerry's voice sounded a little more shot. You know, you could hear Brand. I was like pretty sure it was Brand, but I was having some of that, you know, is this Brand? Because you couldn't really hear the keys too well. You couldn't even really hear his voice too well. So I was having some of that. second guessing, but I just went, I was like, all right, I think this is definitely Brent. I think it's 80s. Definitely not early. Could be late, but let me just play the game. Went with 85. Jerry's voice sounded, kind of ragged, which it could in 87 too, but did the best I could with a tough one.
Barry, you guessed 89, and you were 3 years off in total over the 5's tracks. Usually that's enough to win.
And I had 88 written down. So a few things. One is pleasure to play with you guys. Adam, Grayson, very erudite deadheads. You guys really are. I think it's been a really spot on competition. Here's the thing about this. I went to the next two nights. I went to 3:30 and 3:31. I didn't go to 3:29. So, and I've listened to those a zillion times, but this was an audience tape. And what I heard on this audience tape was Brent more raspy than I remember him being in 87. So I wrote down 88 initially. I go, this sounds like probably an 88. But then I go, no, but Brent sounds really, then I was like, could it be a 90 or an 8? I go, I think it might be 89 or 88. Let me just go with 89. And I didn't have that confidence. And I went to a lot of shows, listened, was there the next two nights, but it didn't come out to me because of Jerry's voice. I remember him being less raspy in 87. When he came back, it got gradually, my memory of it. I don't listen to that much 87 anymore, but during the time period I did. And Brent just sounded like 89, 90 Brent to me. That's what it sounded like. It did not sound like right after Coma Brent.
Grayson, a very reasonable 1990.
So it sounded a little bit, I think it was the 3:21:90. They played half step. I think that version was on without a net. Something just about like the jam, as the Brent's keyboard, it just sounded like 90 a little bit. I almost went with October 89 because it had a little bit of that sound. And again, interesting thing about the October 89s, they didn't do the Across the Rio Grande, that part of the song, for it ended like before that, which I always thought was a little interesting. There's no explanation why, but just that October 89 run. I wouldn't have guessed 87. I would have said either 89 or like spring 90.
Lovely, Grayson. Thank you. Steve, I can speak for everyone. I want to say we really, really appreciate your curating and your commentary and your insights.
Oh, I appreciate it. This was so much fun.
All right, if you want to be a contestant on the show, sponsor the show, or make comments and ask questions, email us at info@guesttheyear.net. Thank you to Dylan, James, and Jack for helping out behind the scenes. Thank you, Steve, for a tremendous, tremendous episode. Brilliant guy. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks to the amazing tapers whose recordings made the show possible. Congratulations to Adam for the three-peat. Very impressive. And to our other contestants, thanks for playing. And remember, it is all one song anyway.
And I bid you good night. Good night. Good night. And I bid you good night. Good night. Good night.